you see the trees growing from the ground.
Hey everyone, it's your girl Farmer C, and I'm coming to you today from my home office, taking a little break in between calls. You know, when it's Zoom call time, she do like that, but after the Zoom call, you know, I give a little shoulder, a little clavicle going on. But I wanted to come and do a quick video today about grants. And the reason I want to do this video is because a lot of you asked me questions in my inbox. Some of you may be familiar with some of the grants that we've been able to get for our farm. Some of you may know that I am a fundraiser by trade, and so when people think of fundraisers, oftentimes they think of grants or grant writers, or people who do events, and I've done both of those in my career. I don't do those anymore. Well, I do still work with private grants, but they are typically because one of the donors that I'm working with, they may have a family foundation that makes grants, and so I deal with it in that regards. And I just wanted to come on and kind of clarify some things, provide some background information about grants. My very first fundraising job was actually as a formal fundraising job that I got paid for, was as a grants writer for a city. So I wrote a lot of federal and state proposals that, you know, you write it. Usually it's competitive. There were a few that weren't necessarily competitive. You just had to make sure that you fit certain, you know, that you did certain things and fit certain criteria, and then you would receive the money. And then it's also where I learned the difference about applications. It's where I learned the difference in types of funding. You have grants, you have cost assistantship programs, there are other subsidies, but today I'm really going to focus on grants, okay? And specifically for farmers, although it's going to be some general information that may be good for anyone who is interested in grants. If you happen to be new to this channel, I am a farmer. I own Green Heifer Farms, which I established in 2018, and it's a family farm. It's part of the legacy that I am leaving for my children and my grandchildren. And I am also a fundraiser. I'm a global fundraiser, so I still have my full-time job. For all of you who are talking about or thinking about going into farming and you're like, I'm gonna start a farm and quit my job, don't do that. Or at least give it a lot of thought, okay? But that's a whole nother video. If y'all want me to talk about that, then let me know down below. But hopefully you enjoy coming to my channel, you enjoy whatever you're about to watch, and you decide to subscribe and become part of the family. And for all of you who are coming back, thank you, I appreciate it. I want to get into the conversation about grants, because a lot of times when you say farming, people associate that with one of the pockets or the types of businesses that can get government grants. And the government gives away gazillions a year in subsidies, which often go to states and territories first and then kind of trickles down. But they also do have some money that goes directly to small businesses, certain types of small businesses, and those businesses are typically, or big businesses too, but those businesses are typically businesses that somehow meet a need that the government has, or that somehow advances what the government has going on. So it may be research, it may be farming. So farming is one of the categories that can compete for grants. And when people think about starting a farm, a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I've heard this. I'll get a grant to buy some land, or I'll get inquiries from people asking me about grants to buy land. So let me define what a grant is. A grant is a sum of money that is given from one entity to another entity. And there are different types of grants. It's not a gift typically, because there is some application, or there's some criteria that must be met. It could be that you have to be a nonprofit. You have to be, a lot of folks want you to be a 501c3. Or it could be that you're a certain type of business, or that you're going to do a certain thing. But the difference between grants and gifts are that typically if someone's going to give you something, then boom, here, it's a gift, we're done. That's the ideal way to give gifts. So for those of you who be giving stuff and then be wanting to check up on it, and what did you do with the so-and-so I gave you? That's not how you're supposed to give. Once you give it, you forget, it's gone, okay? That was for somebody. Somebody needed that. But with the grant, you're supposed to do something. Now, there's restricted and unrestricted. And there are different levels of restriction, and there are different levels to get to unrestricted. Unrestricted simply means that once they give you the grant, it's the closest to a gift. So you put in the application, you put in the request, whatever, they give you the money, and if they say it's unrestricted, they may say, you can do whatever you want with it. Apply it to the greatest need, but maybe you have to submit like an annual report or something, maybe. But it's pretty hands-off, you know, not really any strings attached. And then as you move down, you may get something that's lightly restricted, where they may say, okay, you have to be a certain kind of organization to apply, and then you have to use the money for a bucket of work, or, you know, there's an umbrella of things in which you can use the money for. And so that's considered like lightly restricted. And then of course, as you move down the line, you get to heavy restricted, where it's very specific, it's very detailed, lots of strings attached. Or, you know, most people want it as unrestricted as possible. But when you're getting into grants, especially when you get into the conversation about public funds coming from any type of government source, there's going to be some restriction, because there's certain things that governments cannot give you money to do. So one of the questions I often get asked is, are there grants to buy land? And to my knowledge, there is not a grant, a public grant, a government grant for you specifically to purchase farmland. And the government typically provides resources for land purchases through loans. There are some loans that are out there. They do have some low interest loans. They do have loans for people who may not have as strong of a credit score if you're applying as an individual, or you don't have like a lengthy, if you're a new farmer, beginning farmer, so you don't have this record of demonstrated results and production to bring to the table. And there are some programs out there for you. There's some money that is set aside for special groups, whether it's veterans, what they term socially disadvantaged, which are usually groups that have historically and currently have been kept out and are being kept out of resource access, or given more obstacles to access resources. So there are those loans that are available, but a loan is different than a grant. A loan you have to pay back. A grant you typically don't have to pay back unless you don't do what you say you're going to do, and then folks can ask for their money back. So one of the key things to know about grants is it is a legal contract. So whatever you say you're going to do with that money, that's exactly what you need to do, okay? If there is a grant agreement, you have to do exactly what you say you're gonna do. So that's very, very important, because what you don't want to happen is for somebody to come and ask for the money back, or for them to go after any of your assets in order to recoup any losses that they feel they have sustained because, you know, they gave you this grant and you didn't do what you said you were going to do. Now, if you do what you say you're going to do and the results aren't what you had forecasted or projected, they're not typically that's not cause for them to come and take the money back. You're going to have to report why you didn't achieve those results, and it can make it more difficult to get future grant funding for that. But if you say that you're going to, you know, produce X amount and you don't, typically they're not going to come and ask for the money back, as long as you do what you said you were going to do in order to get that outcome. Okay, so that's very important to know. It's also important to know with grants that, especially when you're dealing with government grants, that you're going to have some reporting. There's going to be some type of requirement for you to provide information, and how much really just depends on what the funding opportunity is, what agency, etc. And again, for most agricultural funding, it's going to fall under the umbrella of the USDA, although there are a few other pockets, a few other agencies when we're looking at federal. Right now, when it comes to state, it may be your state Department of Agriculture, it may be a municipal grant. So there's a lot of different places to look for government grants. But typically when we're talking farming, it's going to be the USDA or one of its agencies, or, you know, one of the sub, what would you call it? If USDA is like the big department, I think the smaller ones are agencies, whatever it is. United States Department, yeah. I think that's how it goes. But anyway, there's a lot of different agencies. Farm Service Agency falls under USDA. You've got NRCS, which deals with natural resources and conservation. So you have all of these agencies that fall under the USDA. And the thing about reporting is you want to make sure that you do those reports accurately, and you want to make sure that you do those reports on time, okay? Because what you're doing as you're starting to get into the grant world, if you are successful in receiving a grant, is you're building a resume. And so they want to know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, ideally get close to or even exceed the goals, the outcomes and objectives that you put in the grant. They want to know that. And then they're going to be looking at, you know, do they turn receipts in on time, or, you know, make sure that things stay current. So you definitely want to make sure that you stay on point with reporting. Now, I mentioned all of the different possible agencies briefly that you want to look at for different grants. A lot of times people immediately think the USDA. Boom, I'm gonna go for a USDA grant and try to get, you know, this really large size grant, or a significant grant, at least in relation to your farming business's income. If you're a beginning farmer, some of the best places to start looking is actually locally. What does your county offer? Some counties offer grants to help with infrastructure, to help get a well dug, for example, or to help provide resources that may help the local farming economy. So look locally, look at your county, your city, definitely look at your state's Department of Agriculture and see what they have. And then there may be some foundations as well that support farming businesses. I'm not really going to get into the private grants in this email. I'm not going to get to the private grants in this video. I'm really going to focus on public sources of funding, government sources of funding. So those are places to also look. And then, of course, look at federal opportunities. Now, when it comes to federal grants, okay, you're going to want to make sure that you're registered at grants.gov and at sam.gov. And grants.gov is the repository for all of the federal, well, not all of, but pretty much all of, most of federal grant opportunities. And they include, it's like the electronic version of the CFDA. What does that stand for? Catalog for Domestic Assistance, I think. So grants.gov is the actual database for that. And essentially, It is a catalog of grant opportunities that are current, grant opportunities that have passed. They have grant opportunities that have been archived. So it's a great resource to go and look at and see what kind of things are out there. So if you go to grants.gov and just type in USDA or type in farm or, you know, something that's relating to what you're interested in getting a grant for, then they will show you all of the opportunities that may be open, that are forecasted. They'll actually show you opportunities that they anticipate having funding for, and then they'll show you things that have already passed and closed or things that have been archived. And so you want to do that. You want to go to grants.gov. You want to make sure you're registered. Now, I find it interesting in farming, more so than in any other area that I have written grants for. There are a few grants that they will allow you to actually turn in a paper copy or like mail in copies to your representatives for that particular agency, your local representatives, which is interesting. And I'm sure it's because, you know, especially with traditional farmers, many of them aren't necessarily on the computer. And so registering for grants.gov and doing all those kind of things can be, you know, that can place additional obstacles in them being able to receive the funding. Now, for the most part, and you can turn in paper, let me just say, you can turn in paper copies also if there's some other reason. I know they allow them like in areas that may not have stable internet access, so they can turn in paper copies if you have some kind of physical challenge or some other type of challenge that would keep you from being able to, you know, be on the computer or for whatever reason. You could also turn in a hard copy, but for the most part, they like for you to do them electronically. And let me just be real, most of the grant money that's given out is not given to small farmers like me, maybe that you are. It's given to big conglomerate farming operations, the big boys, the ones who will be like, oh, I'm a farmer, I'm so tired, when you got automated equipment. You don't even get in your equipment. You just hit a button from an office and it's being operated, you know, automatically. There's a lot of that. But there is money. And I believe that you got to tell me no. And I've gotten some yeses. I've gotten some yeses. And it's really all about putting together a compelling application that makes sure you check all the boxes. That's not a guarantee you're going to get the money, but it does increase the likelihood. And then let me know if you want more grant-focused, fundraising-focused videos, because, you know, get some adjustment. Okay, because that's what I do. So back to grants. So you want to make sure you're registered at grants.gov or sam.gov. Both, actually. You're going to need to register at both. And it's a process. Give yourself 2 to 4 weeks to be able to do it. Like, don't go to USDA and be like, ooh, here go an opportunity, I'm going to apply for that. And think that you're going to just apply for it. It's a process. You have to get your DUNS number. You've got to establish who's, you know, the POC, what is that? Person of contact, point of contact at your business. It's a process, it's a form. Like, it's some stuff you got to do, okay? So give yourself 2 to 4 weeks to go through that process. Once you're registered, then you can start applying for opportunities. So you want to make sure you're registered. You also want to make sure you know your local people. So typically, you know, even though the USDA is federal, they have offices regionally, depends on where you are, but they may be regionally, they may be countywide. However, you want to know who your person is, okay? Make sure you know who your person is. That is a resource for you. You need to know your USDA person. You need to know your FSA person. You need to know if you're in the rural area, your Office of Rural Development person. Like, these need to be your friends. You need to know your local people. Keep a spreadsheet. Know their name, all right? Get to know them. I know my people. And sometimes I may, you know, forget to get something in on time, and they can extend some grace. So even when it comes to federal grants, people are people. And when it's possible, establish a relationship. If you go to grants.gov, you see this opportunity you're interested in, maybe it's already passed. And a little tip, if you look at something and it's already passed, chances are, it's no guarantee, but chances are it will reopen in approximately 10 to 12 months. So you can kind of project and plan for that. So maybe you give that person, you know, send them an email. Oftentimes they'll have a program officer on there with the phone number. You can reach out to them. Don't reach out to them when it's an active grant because they're busy. They got things going on. But when it's a downtime for that particular program, you can reach out and you can establish some type of report that can be helpful down the line. So there's that piece. You want to make sure you're registered. You want to establish rapport if possible. Another thing you can do is you can ask them if it is possible for them to share with you some of the old successful proposals, like some that have already been funded and those programs, you know, those grants are concluded. Some of them will actually send you examples of successful grant applications. So keep that in mind as well. The next tip I want to give to you about grants is you want to make sure that you go through that application with a fine-tuned comb, okay? Don't try to tweak it. Don't try to slip something in there. If you are not the type of entity that can apply, then don't apply. Okay, don't waste your time. Make sure that you're looking at those thoroughly. A lot of grants are for colleges and universities or research institutes, or maybe they're for nonprofit, you know, 501c3, or a lot of them sometimes will say, or some of them will say for nonprofits other than 501c3. If it doesn't say for profit, if it doesn't say small business, if it doesn't say for your farm, then don't do that. Like, because that just complicates things, and you don't want them to associate your organization with someone who doesn't follow the rules. So make sure you go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure you answer all of the questions accurately, truthfully. Make sure that you submit all necessary forms. And sometimes, depending on whose grant, you know, who the grantor is, what agency, who's the program officer, some of them will actually review your grant applications prior to submittal. They can't tell you, like, hey, instead of saying that, say this, and things like that. But they can see any potential red flags and make sure that, you know, you have all your boxes checked, and things like that. If you're submitting on grants.gov, it's hard to not make sure everything is done, because it pretty much tells you, hey, you forgot to complete, you know, this part, or you need to include this form as well, and stuff like that. So make sure you go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And lastly, what I will say as far as grants of any kind is that, you know, you don't want to become reliant upon grants. Grants are great to build capacity. They're great to maybe expand or to somehow start a new initiative or something like that, but they're not meant to be a sustaining source of income. They're not designed that way. So if you receive a grant for a certain amount to do something, a lot of grantors are not necessarily interested in you coming back the next year for money to do that same thing. So you always want to be thinking of how can you leverage that money? How can you use it to spur additional revenue generation or investment? So you always want to be looking at it as an arm or a spoke to your wheel, but it's not the wheel that's gonna, you know, be responsible for continuously moving your farming business forward. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope you got a couple of nuggets. If you like this type of content, let me know. I will share more. We can go more in depth on not just, you know, federal or public or government grants, but we can talk about private grants. There's other things out there that are available. We can talk about, you know, I've done a crowdfunder that has been successful, and just some ideas around how to secure the capital for your business. And if you really, really want to go in depth with me, then So Green is open for registration. So Green is the way to work with me directly in a continuous sustained period of time. We meet weekly. You get a chance to ask me questions. I bring in experts. I teach lessons as well. And then, of course, there's always Big Hemping if you're interested specifically in hemp. It's a gateway crop, and I do call it a gateway crop. Don't bet your whole farm on any one plant unless it's the magic beanstalk, okay? That's my opinion. But if you are interested in getting started in the hemp business and really want to focus on that business building part, then I'm your girl. I'm not going to teach you how to grow plants, but I will help you in trying to grow your farming business. All right? Expand the brand. That's what we're about. So anyway, all right, that's all I got. My lunch break is over. I got to go back to work and get my coins, okay? Get my coins, and then I'm going down to the farm after that. So very full day. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Would appreciate a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. A like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.